Hi Kipsters, it's Miss Stabrowski here. Thanks for tuning in for your homework. I'm going to do a quick mini lesson here to get you started in Chapter 8 and to help you with the charts. Let's start with the aims. The first aim is to use evidence from the text in order to draw conclusions about a character's development based on their actions and reactions to plot events. And the second aim is to use inferential evidence from the text to determine the connection between the character's beliefs and transformation to themes in the text. So, starting with the directions, it says, tonight your job is to read Chapter 8. In order to read and analyze this chapter, please go to the YouTube site. It is on your homework and you are tuned in, so thanks for doing that. You're going to watch and work on the lesson with me, Miss Stabrowski, then finish reading the chapter and completing the airtime on your own. Work it, as I know you will. So let's get started. Alright, I'm just waiting for there we go. Part 1. 1 second. Alright, sorry about that. Okay, part 1. Let Ms. Stabrowski show you. This chart helps us organize our thinking about how authors use characters' development to convey themes in the text. So you'll see a 3-column chart. On the left-hand column it says example from the text, and we have a couple of examples that are made up or from a different text. The second column, it says character's reaction to the event or conflict. The student, we'll read that in a second, excuse me. And then the third column says conclusion about character's development. So we're going to go across, starting with the first row. Alright, so a pretend example from the text would be, a student struggles to understand a math problem in today's class. Okay, not that big of a deal. The character's reaction to the event or conflict. The student reaches out to Mr. Lee for extra help, gives herself more time to study, and tries to stay optimistic. So that's her reaction to having an issue with a math problem today, with a struggle with a math problem today. The conclusion that we can draw, if this were the example from the text, would be, she probably believes that learning is a difficult process that requires effort because she never gave up on trying to understand the problem. Alright, so because she struggled and then she reached out for help and stayed optimistic, we can conclude that she believes learning is a process that requires effort because she never gave up. Makes sense. Let's look at the next example. This example is from a book you guys read last year called Speak. Melinda, the main character, is raped at a party. Tragic. The reaction to this conflict, to this major event in her life, is that Melinda becomes silent, depressed, and antisocial at school. Well, the conclusion that we can draw as good readers is that Melinda probably thinks that the rape was her fault because she's too ashamed to talk to anyone. So as good readers, our job is to take an event in the text, an example, identify how a character reacts to it, how they behave, the words that they say, etc., and then to make a conclusion. What can we understand as a result of the event and the character's reaction? This then leads to the next section here, which says, if these examples were included in a text, they'd probably be talking about what kinds of themes. So as a good reader, I'm supposed to say, okay, what lessons should I be able to learn? Well, for the first text and the second text, we have 2 different sets of lessons. So these are the ones that I came up with. Please take notes when you see my text come up. It says, first text, grit, perseverance, self-improvement. Our student struggling in math class showed grit. She believed in perseverance, overcoming something after multiple tries, and she believed in self-improvement. These are lessons that we could learn if this was a short text we were reading. In the second text, Melinda from Speak is filled with guilt, shame, and self-hate. These are possible themes or possible issues that are going to be discussed in this text, and as we know, in Speak, these are major issues that Melinda struggles with. So you can tell authors use every bit of a text, the event and the way the character reacts to it, to really get their themes hammered home, to really get us to understand what they want us to learn. So let's go on to the next section, where we're going to look at some examples in To Kill a Mockingbird. Same exact chart. We're going to start with the first row. Example from the text number 1. Jem is moody and silent after he gets his pants back from the Radley house fence. If you remember when he went back in the middle of the night, he comes back. Scout has no idea what's happened, but the next morning she wakes up, and he's really moody and silent. So, the reaction to the event. Well, Scout, her reaction is to leave him alone because she doesn't want to start trouble. The quotation I chose was, as Atticus had advised me to do, I tried to climb into Jem's skin and walk around in it. Page 57. Her reaction to Jem being moody was to try to climb into his skin and walk around in it. She leaves him alone. The conclusion we can draw is, Scout is realizing that Jem must be feeling pretty low and doesn't want to start a fight. She is taking Atticus's advice and thinks it's better to try to understand the way a person feels instead of fighting against them and making it worse. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. We see the examples, Jem being moody, the reaction of Scout leaves him alone because she's learning her lesson from Atticus. The conclusion we can draw is that she's taking advice and she's learning. She thinks it's better to try to understand the way a person feels rather than to fight against them and make it worse. We know that this is new for Scout if you think back to the way she treated Walter Cunningham in school. She usually likes to fight, and here she's avoiding a fight. Pretty interesting stuff. So let's look at the second row now. This is a different example from the text. Here we have Mr. Nathan Radley. He fills the hole with cement in the tree, even though the tree is not sick or dying. Well, let's look at how Jem reacted to that. Jem investigates why the tree was filled in. Quotation, "Why'd you do it, sir?" Page 62. And is very upset to find out that the tree was perfectly healthy. When we went in the house, I saw he had been crying. Page 63. So the event was Mr. Radley fills the hole. The reaction was Jem investigated. He asked why he did it. Mr. Radley told him it was perfectly healthy. And so what he does is he goes and he cries about it. This is unusual for Jem. So what can this tell us about his development? Well, I was thinking about this a lot, and I was thinking Jem is realizing that Mr. Radley has ended their communication with Boo. Jem realizes that Boo is being kept away from them. He feels sad for Boo instead of curious about him like he used to be. Jem, maturely, is starting to empathize with Boo. Take a moment to copy that down in your chart as well. It's a pretty big deal that we're realizing Jem, upon finding out Mr. Radley has filled the hole with cement, and realizing that the tree was totally fine, Jem gets really upset. He's sad that there's no way that they can get presents through the tree anymore. He's empathizing with Boo. This is new. If you need to pause the video here to finish copying, you may do so. I'm going to the next page of your classwork, of your homework, excuse me. So the next section at the top of your homework on the second page, it says, the themes that are developing based on what the characters are going through and learning about are. So if we think back to that chart, and we looked at what Scout was doing, and we looked at what Jem was doing, these are the themes that I came up with. Go ahead and copy down what I've written here as well. I have 4 major themes that are kind of developing here. Empathy, Scout empathizing with Jem, Jem empathizing with Boo. Connections between humans, the way in which these kids are actually learning about how to build and maintain relationships with other people. Coming of age, which we know means growing up. We can see Scout growing up by the way she's treating Jem better, and we can tell that Jem's growing up by the way he understands how Boo might feel. And then finally, love wins over hate. I still really like this theme because I think that there's something kind of hateful about the way Mr. Radley filled up that cement hole. And something maybe kind of hateful about the way Boo seems to be trapped inside that house. But then there's this idea of love and the way that the kids love Boo even though they don't know him. They loved the tree, they loved their communication with Boo even though they don't know him. Alright, so as you can see, if you go back to the front, to the page before, we had our chart, we had an example, we had the character's reaction, we drew a conclusion about it, and then we went ahead and we identified a few themes that could be coming out because of this. Alright, so let's go ahead and try this in Chapter 8. Open up your book, turn to page 63, and follow along as I read. Here we go. Chapter 8. For reasons unfathomable to the most experienced prophets in Macomb County, autumn turned to winter that year. We had 2 weeks of the coldest weather since 1885, Atticus said. Mr. Avery said it was written on the Rosetta Stone that when children disobeyed their parents, smoked cigarettes, and made war on each other, the seasons would change. Jem and I were burdened with the guilt of contributing to the aberrations of nature, thereby causing unhappiness to our neighbors and discomfort to ourselves. Old Mrs. Radley died that winter, but her death caused hardly a ripple. The neighborhood seldom saw her except when she watered her cannas. Jem and I decided that Boo had got her at last. But when Atticus returned from the Radley house, he said she died of natural causes, to our disappointment. Ask him, Jem whispered. You ask him, you're the oldest. That's why you ought to ask him. Atticus, I said, did you see Mr. Arthur? Atticus looked sternly around his newspaper at me. I did not. Jem restrained me from further questions. He said Atticus was still touchous about us and the Radleys, and it wouldn't do to push him any. Jem had a notion that Atticus thought our activities that night last summer were not solely confined to strip poker. Jem had no firm basis for his ideas. He said it was merely a twitch. Alright, so looking at our chart, the first row, the example says, after Mrs. Radley dies, the kids ask Atticus if he saw Boo, Arthur, in the house. Atticus, I said, did you see Mr. Arthur? So I'm thinking about the reaction to that event. I have Jem's reaction here. Jem responds by telling Scout not to push Atticus on the subject. He doesn't want to draw attention back to their obsession with Boo. So Scout kind of pushes and asks, even though Jem was kind of on her side and says, yeah, ask. When Atticus doesn't want to respond, he tells her not to push it anymore, which is a little bit different from what we're used to with Jem. Remember, Jem was really obsessed with that play that they would do about the Radleys that summer. So the conclusion that I'm able to draw about Jem is that this shows that Jem is becoming more mature. It also shows that Jem might have a new respect for Boo. He doesn't want to seem like a little kid bothering him anymore. Perhaps Jem has empathy for Boo now, after the pants incident and the tree. So if I think back on all of the events that have happened in chapters 6 and 7 especially, and I think about the tree with the presents in it and how much Jem was upset when Mr. Radley filled the hole, and if I think about the way the pants were neatly folded on the fence when he went back for them, Jem seems to be understanding that Boo was nicer than they realized, even though he still has moments when he thinks Boo could be a murderer. This shows me that Jem is becoming more mature. Go ahead and make sure you fill that in for the chart. Alright, I'm going to keep reading, so if you need to pause it to fill that in, you may do so now. Back to the book. Next morning I awoke, looked out the window, and nearly died of fright. My screams brought Atticus from his bathroom, half-shaven. The world's ending, Atticus. Please do something. I dragged him to the window and pointed. No, it's not, he said. It's snowing. Jem asked Atticus would it keep up. Jem had never seen snow either, but he knew what it was. Atticus said he didn't know any more about snow than Jem did. I think, though, if it's watery like that, it'll turn to rain. The telephone rang, and Atticus left the breakfast table to answer it. That was Eula May, he said when he returned. I quote, as it has not snowed in Macomb County since 1885, there will be no school today. Eula May was Macomb's leading telephone operator. She was entrusted with issuing public announcements, wedding invitations, setting off the fire siren, and giving first aid instructions when Dr. Reynolds was away. When Atticus finally called us to order and bade us look at our plates instead of out the windows, Jem asked, how do you make a snowman? I haven't the slightest idea, said Atticus. I don't want you all to be disappointed, but I doubt if there'll be enough snow for a snowball even. Alright, let's pause there. In our chart, page 64, it says, Scout wakes up screaming because. We'll go ahead and copy this down. Scout screams, quote, the world's ending, Atticus. Please do something. I dragged him to the window and pointed. No, it's not, he said. It's snowing. So our event in the text is that Scout wakes up screaming because of snow, something she's never seen before. So her reaction is pretty obvious. Scout is screaming and freaking out because she's never seen snow before. She thinks the world is ending because the sky seems to be falling. So the conclusion that we can draw about Scout is pretty straightforward, I'd say. Scout is innocent and naive, one of our vocabulary words. This shows us how young our narrator is. She is innocent and easily excited. Jem is less shocked, even though he's never seen it before either. He's becoming more grown up than she is. Alright, so we have some pretty interesting conclusions that we've made about both Jem and Scout. And if you take a look at the next section on your page, you see we're going to look at the developing themes. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. So pause it if you still need to if you still need to fill in the chart. You can pause it now. Alright. So, the developing themes. If we think back to the last page, we had Jem becoming more mature, and we had Scout being innocent and naive. So the themes that are really, really speaking to me are coming of age and empathy. So these are the first two that I've mentioned up here, if you look. And then I explained it. I wrote, the kids are growing up and learning about how to relate with other people. They're learning about how the world works and about how to deal with events or people that are shocking or different. It's pretty clear that there's a lot going on in this novel, and we're seeing the novel through the eyes of these kids. We're seeing the events through the eyes of these kids. And these kids do a lot of growing up. And part of growing up means learning how to empathize with others and how to build relationships with others. So in my mind, coming of age and empathy are two of the strongest themes that seem to be coming out of this text so far. That doesn't mean that they're the only ones, though. Alright, so once you've finished copying this down, you can go ahead and follow me going through the rest of today's homework. The next section says, okay, now it's your turn. Directions. Read the rest of Chapter 8. As you read, make notes to summarize the gist every page or every few pages. You should do that right into your text. Fill in the charts below based on the work we did in class today. Have fun. So you'll notice in some of the first column where it says example from the text, in some of them you'll see I did the whole quote. You don't need to add anything if the quote is entirely there. In the second column, you do need to fill in the rest of the sentence, Miss Maudie's opinion of the snow, for example, and then you need to make your conclusion about a character's development. In the second row, though, you'll notice I wrote page 66, Jem and Scout borrow snow from Miss Maudie. Now, I didn't include the quote, so you need to go ahead and make sure you include the quote there. Then you finish that sentence as well, make it specific, and you make your conclusion. On the next page, you'll see 3 more rows. Some of them I made spaces for you to do the quotes. Some of them I just left spaces for you to go ahead and answer questions or fill in sentence starters. Almost every box needs some of your work in it, except for perhaps this box and this box. So make sure that you're paying close attention to where you're supposed to be. The page numbers are in there as well. On the bottom of that page, it asks you to identify more developing themes. Some of them might still be coming of age, empathy, love wins over hate, but some of them might be something else as well. So go ahead and show me your critical thinking and the themes you're finding. Then you're going to choose one theme down at the bottom that you've been tracking or noticing the most throughout the text. Which theme is starting to jump out to you the most? And then on the next page, the last page, I want some examples of how this theme has appeared so far in the text. Please answer in complete sentences using examples or direct quotes from the text. Treat this like a short response with a couple of really, really good examples. If you have any questions, you can always feel free to call me. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of Chapter 8, and thanks so much for tuning in. I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye!